Hi, this is Dr. Karen, and I'm from Empowering People with Invisible Chronic Illness Foundation. We are best known as the EPIC Foundation. So I am so excited today because I have someone here very near and dear to my heart, a very special guest. We are featuring a series this month. It's called Afternoon with an AI Thriver, and I'll explain what that means in a couple of seconds here. But every Saturday in April, please expect an interview from me with someone, a special guest, at 2:30 p.m. Central Standard. So at this time, I'm again really excited. This month is April, as you all know. And April is both Cushing's Awareness Month and Adrenal Insufficiency Awareness Month. Those are two illnesses that are on opposite ends of the spectrum and two illnesses that I am a warrior of and our special guest as well. So let me go ahead and introduce this person. Someone has already said hi. Hi, Diana. Excited to have you here. I'm going to introduce our special guest. Let's get to it. This is Liz. And hi, Liz. So good to see you. Oh my goodness. I can't believe I'm this happy and hyper. I almost seem manic a little bit, but it's because I'm just so excited to see you right now. Hi, Rachel. I'm so excited to see you and that you have taken time to be with us today. I just want to tell you something really special about Liz. Not only is she a fellow warrior and she's taken her time to be with us today, but she is a special person within the EPIC Foundation. Liz is a patient advocate, and she does so much for us in terms of connecting to our community. And I just want to take a second to say thank you, Liz, for that, because, I mean, you're just so special to us. You really are.
Thank you.
I know I haven't let you get a word in edgewise, but we're going to we're gonna get to it. I'm really excited. Yes, you are a patient advocate with us, and I think most of you know that the people within EPIC, have walked the walk and we've talked the talk, and we are warriors ourselves, and that is really important to me and to us. So this is a really special time. But again, thank you for taking this time to do this interview. And I reached out to you to do this interview because I think that your story has so much power. I believe in the power of the voice. And I just want people to know your personal journey as we attempt to also increase awareness and let people know what it actually means, Cushing's and also adrenal insufficiency. Okay, so for the record, can you just can you tell me your name and it's not polite to ask your age. I don't even know why that's a question, but just so people sort of get an idea of your life story.
My name's Elizabeth Brennan, and it's okay to ask. I'm 39. I actually turned 39 in January.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so next thing I would like to know, I'd like to know if you're married, and I would love to hear about because so many of us have stories that people know about. I always love hearing people's love story. So
Perfect. Me too, actually.
So I'd love to hear if you're married and a little bit about your partner, your spouse.
Yeah, I'm really lucky and blessed. I'm married to the most fantastic man ever. It sounds corny, but I really have found my soulmate. I probably wouldn't have been able to go through everything I've gone through if I hadn't met him. Our love story is kind of interesting. When I first moved to town here, he would deliver water to the house that I was renting. And I remember my landlord always bugging, saying, you should date Tim. You should date Tim. And I was like, yeah, okay. Sure, whatever, right? Never really talked to him. When we both started to kind of notice each other in town, I was at an event, and he'd worked up the courage to come and talk to me, and we talked a little bit, and he said, like, what are you doing next weekend? And I'm thinking in my head, like, oh my God, I think I'm getting asked out on a date. This is so weird. It's been so long. So I was like, well, I've got, this little activity going on, but I'm free after that, right? And he's like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then he's like, okay, and then he walked away. And
Oh,
I was like doing the is it me? Like, did I? What is it? He eventually came back and did a proper asking me out. But our first date is the best. I love telling the story because like he works for his family, and he water delivery. They do septic, all kinds of things. So he goes, I'm gonna come pick you up in the truck. And so I'm waiting, and all of a sudden I hear a truck pull up, and I look out my window, and here's this big semi truck, and all I see is a big tank that says septic. So he picked me up in the septic truck, and that was our first date. Was that he took me he took me to all these places where he pumped people's houses out, and then we went to the lagoon where he dumped the septic.
oh, wow.
Yeah, and for him it was like, if she can handle this, then she's a good woman.
Wow. So that was your test. I love that,
Yeah,
Tim.
yeah. So
That
and
is an
then
awesome story.
yeah, yeah. And so then, we were kind of like a match made in heaven after that.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. So, yeah, so I mean, I hate to be corny, but what an interesting metaphor we can use this as, because, you talk about how that was sort of the test for you to determine if you could like stick this out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you guys have been on an amazing ride, no pun intended,
Yeah.
since.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
yeah.
when we met, I was just sort of at that time kind of getting diagnosed. So I mean, like he kind of he started dating me, and I was full disclosure about, like, I think I've got some problems and I'm trying to get it all figured out. And
Yeah.
so he was right with me right from the beginning. In fact, like, some people have their cold feet before they get married. My cold feet was, I was like, he knows that I use this analogy. I was like, it's like you go to buy a vehicle and you know that the motor's going and the transmission, but yet you still buy it. So that's what
Yes.
I said. I was like, that I've got some issues, and with my health, and it's not the best. Yet you still want to commit to being with me for the rest of your life, and
Wow.
which was truly amazing. So once I got over that he's like, he'll love me no matter what. I mean, then I got over the cold feet.
Yeah, of course. And I imagine that it's so hard to internalize that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's deeper than we can even fathom that
Yeah.
someone would take us where we're at,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
even still, there was nothing that could possibly prepare you for what was to come, I
Absolutely.
imagine, as
Yeah.
we'll learn more about. Tell me about, is there any other family that has had an impact on your life other than Tim?
My mom's an amazing woman. Like, she's like my number. I'm an only child, so
Yeah.
she only had me. And she's like my number one fan. And I mean, it was hard for her to watch her baby, to be sick,
Yeah.
but she was always there and supportive. Anything I needed, even when she's not feeling well, because she's not the healthiest either, and it didn't matter. I would always come first. And again, without her, yeah, I know some people out there in the chronic illness community, whatever it is that you have, it's amazing how relationships with friends and family can change because they don't understand. And especially Cushing's, it's
Mhm.
devastating to your body, your mind, your soul. And it's hard for you to get over it, let alone family to understand and be supportive of that. Because I know some people have probably felt that, like, oh, why are you so tired, and why are you lazy, and you're
Mhm.
you're overweight because of this and this, and never understanding that there could be some really rare and awful disease that's actually doing it instead. And so I've been really blessed that way with having a really supportive mom. And then my husband's family's been very good too. Like I've been lucky. I love my in-laws, so I don't have to say monster in-law.
Well,
Anything. I've been very lucky.
oh
So
wow, what a blessing that is.
absolutely.
Wow. Hi, mom.
Yeah.
Shout out to Liz's mom and
Yes.
in-laws.
Yeah.
Um, some people say mom in love, and I love that term.
I actually like
Instead of
that.
yeah, instead of mom in law, mom in love. I love that. Um, yeah, I can relate on so many levels. My mom was like ride or die. She passed away in 2018, and I can totally. I'm not an only child, but she like dropped everything to help take care of me and my two daughters. So I can definitely relate. And my mother in love and mom, they would alternate times taking care of me. So I can relate to that as well.
That's
So
um
I love
yeah.
hearing that, Liz. I love, love, love that. Okay, so we're gonna get into um Cushing's.
Yeah.
And I will preface this by saying that many of you out there have seen the cortisol, I'm sorry, the belly fat commercials, right? Like, do you have belly fat? It's probably due to cortisol. And then, with some cortisol supplement. And so, as a result, Cushing's has been known as the fat disease. But it's so much more than that, is it not?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And we'll get into the symptoms and things like that. But I want to know when you knew that you had Cushing's, and then we'll get into the diagnostic process. But when I say when did you know you had Cushing's, obviously you didn't have a label or a something to name it with in the beginning. But certainly there were things that happened where you knew something was wrong.
Yeah, so I think so unofficially knowing, yeah, it was probably around 2006 that I noticed there were some things going on that I was like this is not normal, and I know it's not normal, and I need to find out what's going on.
Mhm.
Um and then of course like having thank God an official diagnosis in 2008, but I was one of those really weird, well, I guess lots of people do this, doctors hate it, but I did it anyway and it saved my life. But
Yeah,
I googled my symptoms,
yeah.
and Cushing's came up, and I was like, there's no way I have that. It's a really rare disease. Why would I have that? Like, I'm not that person. I'm not that one rare person, right?
Mm-hmm.
um but it really did make sense, and I had a starting point, and that's what I used when I went to ask doctors about it.
Yeah, yeah. So, you see the memes out there that say, don't go to Dr. Google, but I'm telling you, Dr. Google has saved many of us, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so we know that it's not just the fat disease, and I hope I'm not being offensive to anyone out there. I'm just using language that is commonly used out there to describe us and our experience by other people even. um
Yeah.
and you knew by looking up your symptoms. So when you talk about symptoms, can you tell us more about what those symptoms were that prompted you to even do the research, even though you had your doubts?
So it really came down to, so I was a person that like many people that have Cushing's, women especially, but men as well, but is you went from like I went from a very athletic, healthy person, to all of a sudden I noticed, um, my appetite increased a bit, and then exercising, and it didn't matter if I exercised or ate right, I just started gaining weight. And what really alarmed me and made me start to really look into things and research was I noticed stretch marks on my stomach. And to me, that was a huge indication of like really rapid weight gain in a short amount of time. Um, and then I started noticing things. Well, obviously, when it comes to like the weight gain and stuff, then you start getting into depression, right? Because no matter what you do, it wasn't going away. Um, Facial hair started. I didn't get the, the hump that you get in the back. I didn't have that. But I had easy bruising, stretch marks, fatigue, um, you know, and so many of those other things, like I said, like like you just kind of the mental capacity, not there as,
Mhm.
concentration, not as good as it was, and depression and stuff, which, I mean, those can be chalked up to so many other things. But when you start kind of putting them together, um, you know, and then when, like I said, when I started looking up Cushing's and saw that it was a lot of the same symptoms, I was like, it could be that's what I
Yeah.
have. So yeah.
Yeah. Which must have been surreal. I imagine, the most prominent, or I guess the most overt symptom, as you mentioned, would be the unexplained rapid weight gain. So, gaining a lot of weight, but then, as you also pointed out, there were so many other scary symptoms that were seemingly random, but most people don't know to put it into one picture. And not to mention the fact that when we do come across information about Cushing's, when we're told that it is diagnosed in only every 3 to 5 of every million people,
Yeah.
yeah, you're sitting there going, that can't be me.
Yeah.
So tell me more about the diagnostic process with Cushing. So you look this up, you find information on Google, now you have your answer, and where did you go from there?
So what I started to do is I just went to like a regular doctor first. And at the time it was I was living in a place that I didn't have like a normal regular doctor. So I just went to see somebody who was available. And it actually happened to be a doctor who was filling in for the normal doctor that would should have been there. And I started off with just saying like, here's what the problems are. That was another thing I forgot to mention with symptoms was my period stopped completely. And I was doing the what is that called? Like where you're tracking it. It's not I wasn't trying to get pregnant or anything. I was single at the time, but I mean I was
Mhm.
tracking cycle and stuff like that. So I was pretty intimate knowing about my body and what was happening in that way, right? So I went to this doctor. He was an older gentleman, like I said, retired, but came to fill in. And I
Mhm.
explained all the things that were going on, the weight gain. That was my biggest concern through all of this. Usually what all the doctors I went to see, because it just started with this guy and then there was many after,
Yeah.
was the big focus was this just this weight gain. And no matter how hard I tried, I wouldn't lose. And in fact, it would get worse. And this doctor looked me right in the face and said, well, I think you have Liz baggage. So he chopped up
Oh,
he totally disregarded the whole like my period. He goes, "Well, that's not a very good method and it's flawed." All the other stuff that I was going through and stuff like
wow.
that's mental baggage. Which is that was like the first really bad experience with a doctor that way in
Mhm.
having them just make those assumptions. And I mean, these are the people that we look to trust,
Yeah.
and, instead of letting that get me down, I was like, "Then I'm gonna go to someone else
Yeah.
because I don't agree with what you've said, and I'm gonna go to somebody else." And so, when I finally found the right doctor, it was, they do the dexamethasone test.
Mhm.
In fact, actually, they had done the dexamethasone test several times, and then I believe I did, like the 24-hour urine and the AM
Mhm.
cortisol and all that stuff. And when I finally found this great doctor, and we did all this testing over and over again, and she was consulting with e- I don't know what they're called, but they're the doctor, like House, if you've ever watched the show House, where
Yes.
he like, yeah, same kind of doctor. So she was working with this type of a doctor, and when they were both finally comfortable, he said, "Yeah, I think this is Cushing's.
Mhm.
Let's get her to an endocrinologist." So yeah, so the kind of diagnosing process was basically the dexamethasone, which is, I mean, bang on every time they did it.
Mhm.
I know other people have struggled where those tests come back semi-normal, but
Yeah.
I later found that I had cyclical Cushing's, which I'm thinking is a lot more common than doctors want to believe.
Mhm.
And that's what happens with people is if you get tested when the cycle is low, you look like you're normal, but you know you're not normal. You know it to your core that you're not normal.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's kind of how that process. And then of course, there's after that, once you become diagnosed with Cushing's, it's where is it coming from? Is it a tumor on the pituitary? Is it on the adrenals? Is it on the lungs somewhere? So of course I've had an IPSS test. If anyone else has ever had that test, I hate to say it, it's the most awful experience I've ever had. Hope to never ever have one ever again in my life.
Yeah.
um and from that, my endocrinologist was pretty sure it was on on my pituitary, but after that test, they were sure that's where it was. So
Mhm. Yeah. So for you, luckily, the dexamethasone test was really, really impactful in getting you a solid diagnosis.
yeah.
Um, but as you mentioned, you had cyclical Cushing's, and just to sort of explain to our audience, I think you explained this, that it's where your cortisol levels, and we know cortisol is our stress hormone, our fight or flight hormone, it helps us to compensate for physical and or emotional trauma or stress. Um, where when you're cycling, it will cycle from high excess cortisol to seemingly low or even normal levels of cortisol. Um, so it's harder for the doctors, and some doctors don't even, they say they've never seen it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so that makes it even harder. But the idea is to go through testing such that you know, they're able to catch the high periods um, of the excess cortisol.
Yeah. And I guess, like, hate using the word lucky because no one's ever lucky getting Cushing's, but lucky that my cyclical was high a lot of the time. So
Mhm.
when testing happened, I mean, like I said, it always came back, like with the levels that you would have for Cushing's. But I forgot to mention too that, like, with all these doctors, the different doctors, one telling me I had mental baggage. I had another doctor who was overweight herself say, "You're not trying enough. You're not working out hard enough. So try the South Beach diet."
Mhm.
But and I had another doctor who did believe me.
Mhm.
He was really great. Did some testing. I didn't realize that they tested wrong. I don't. I believe they should have done a dexamethasone, but I think they just took blood and checked, and you know that old adage, no news is good
Yes.
news. So when I didn't hear anything, I thought, oh, it's fine, right? Not knowing that he'd
Mhm.
actually tested wrong. So I had another doctor put me on the path of polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is, we all know, it's really really similar to
Mhm.
Cushing's, and I actually feel now that sometimes I feel like Cushing's is not as rare as we think it is. And I think a lot of people are getting, like, a lot of women are getting misdiagnosed with PCOS instead of actual Cushing's. Just
Wow.
given those symptoms and stuff. So I had, like, my ovaries, like, checked out, ultrasound and
Mhm.
stuff, and they're like, yeah, you've got cysts on there. So for a long time, I actually thought I maybe had polycystic ovarian, and not Cushing's.
Wow. Yeah. Um, it's incredible how we have to do a lot of the doctoring ourselves, a lot of the research, and just really the self advocacy is so important. So
Yeah.
very important. You also mentioned the IPSS, which stands for inferior petrosal sinus sampling. And I don't want to bring up any traumatic memories here, but I too had the IPSS, and I can definitely relate to that. And for those of you who don't know, it's basically so these Cushing's tumors that are like the size of the end of a pencil tip, because your pituitary is very small. It's located on the base of your brain. It's extremely small. And these tumors tend to be microscopic. And a lot of people, laymen, and even medical doctors don't understand this. The size of the tumor is not what's important in terms of Cushing's, because in Cushing's patients, it doesn't matter if the tumor is growing or not. You can have a very, very tiny tumor and it wreak havoc on your body and cause symptoms.
Yep.
So the IPSS is meant to determine what side of the pituitary the tumor is on, or try to locate where the tumor is, because of the fact that they're often microscopic and sometimes even hidden. And so 60% of these tumors, for anyone out there going through the diagnostic process, this is an actual statistic, that 60% of these tumors don't even show up on normal imaging. So you could get a trillion MRIs and it not show up. So with this IPSS, they put catheters, into your body, through your groin, up through your heart, into your head. And yeah, and then
And you're
they,
waiting for it.
yeah, right. And you're awake the entire time. Were you sedated at all? I
I
was, but
was, and I kept asking for more because it was quite painful. I mean, like they're
yeah,
inserting two catheters in your femoral arteries, um, and then yeah, and then putting them all the way, like it's kind of like an angioplasty. That only goes to your heart, but this goes right up.
yeah,
And the really weird part is they'll inject a dye. I could hear it. You could hear this like I
yes.
don't know if you heard it, but I heard it.
Oh, I heard it.
And I had a
Yeah,
nurse tell me afterwards, well, I've heard like patients have told us that they can hear the injections when it happens, but they can't. I'm one to be like, have you had this test done?
yeah.
You
How
don't
do
know what
you?
you're talking about. Like, stop telling people that.
Oh gosh, I heard it. There's no way to describe it. It's like
So
grinding, or
weird.
it's,
It's so
oh,
weird.
it's the most bizarre, and you're just laying there,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it's almost like bittersweet, because on the one hand you're like, oh god, this is hell, but then on the other hand, it's like, this is my way of getting answers and getting further to, um towards getting help.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So Rachel says to us here, she says, I hear you. She found the IPSS to be very horrible and traumatic.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard when we can relate to each other on such, horrific memories, but
Yeah.
man,
Like I could never figure out, like they never explained to me why I had to be awake for that. I'm like, what? I mean, I
mhm.
get you're deep into my femoral arteries, but I just, if anything goes bad, I don't need to be awake for that either. So I never understood it because
Yeah.
it's not like you need to, to say anything or whatever, but you just, the sedation doesn't, it didn't, it was still quite painful, to have that done.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that maybe the sedation is just so people don't jump off the table, because I know I probably would have jumped off that table, or so,
Boy.
I don't know. Something, because yeah, so gosh, so much to have to go through, just to get your answers.
Yeah.
Um, that leads me to my next question. So you had these doctors who said these terrible things to you. I mean, how dare someone tell you that it's Liz baggage?
Yeah.
Or someone, many of us get the diet and exercise. It's all chalked up to diet and exercise, and these are people we trust, or, we used to trust. What do you think? What are your thoughts about the awareness of Cushing's, in the medical professional community?
So, I mean, I just one word that comes to mind right away, which I'm sure other people can relate to, is frustrating. But understanding at the same point. So I know like a regular GP, they have to know a lot as it is. So, them knowing what Cushing is, number one, or how to recognize it or what tests to do. I mean that is a lot to ask, but really at the end of the day, it's like you said, we trust these people. They've taken their Hippocratic, is it Hippocratic,
Yes.
their oath. Anyway, it's listen to your patient. That person is going to know their body way better than the doctor. And I mean, yeah, it's irritating if a patient is Googling symptoms, but I mean, if it sounds like there's any truth to that, what's it going to hurt to do some tests? And for Cushing's, it's some blood tests at first.
Yes.
What is it? What is it to just do those and hear me as a person? You
Mhm.
know, um, And then the medical community, all of the medical community has this stigma about weight. Like you're
Mhm.
saying, like it's as soon as and it's bad enough that the rest of society thinks that it's horrible when you go to a physician who should be impartial to that, unbiased about it, and will just look at you right away and say, I don't believe anything coming out of your mouth. I think that you just ate yourself to your point of your weight, and this is your fault, and here's how you can stop it.
Yeah.
And not hear you. They don't understand. Like it was amazing to try to watch a doctor just grasp the fact that, like, when I'd say I'm exercising 7 days a week and this is how I eat and it's healthy and it's not making any difference, and in fact, I've gained even more weight and it's not muscle. And I mean,
Mhm.
it's hard enough for me to wrap my head around it. I mean, so for them to not get that and just be like, I don't believe you, basically. It's infuriating to think back about all the doctors who just sloughed it off, the ones saying you could do the South Beach diet. When I'm looking at her going, well, have you done the South Beach diet? Because it doesn't look like
Mhm.
it either, right? Like, how about I judge you now? How does it
Yeah.
feel? Having that old doctor say, maybe you have mental baggage. But if I've
Mhm.
learned anything from this whole journey, it's yes, self advocacy is you fight for you. And if you don't like what someone has told you, try to find someone else, because
Yes.
you will find somebody that will believe you, because you have to, or you won't make it. Is I would have never made it if I didn't push. Because if I just listened to the first guy that said you've got some issues and you need to deal with that, maybe just go talk it out, I probably wouldn't be here. Or the one saying do the South Beach diet. No, no, you got to fight for you for sure. And I'm not a really good person at being um saying things out loud for myself, but when it came to that, I just something burned within me that I was like, no,
Mhm.
I don't like what you're saying, so I'm gonna go find somebody else that's gonna believe me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for that message. It's so empowering and so true. So true. You have to fight for yourself, and you're literally fighting for your life.
Absolutely.
Because one thing we need the audience to know is that if left untreated, Cushing's is fatal. And, it's a harsh reality, but it's true. And we've lost people in the community because of it. You know, um, Oftentimes people will accuse us of doctor hopping. And the response to that is, yeah, technically, maybe
Yeah.
we do
And
have doctor hop, right?
yeah.
But the doctor hopping is for good reason. I mean, you, no one wants, this is not a badge of honor. Nobody wants a diagnosis.
No.
You have to fight. You had to fight for it. The other thing that you brought up, Liz, which I've been trying to wrap my head around for years, is the fact that there are doctors in the medical community. They have the intellectual knowledge of Cushing's, right? So
Yeah.
they know that the unexplained rapid weight gain is that it's unexplained, and there's no logic. So it's not tied to diet and exercise. It's literally related to cortisol levels.
Yeah.
Yet there's still such a stigma, and you alluded to this fact that it's because of social fat phobia, for lack of a better term. And there is research that shows that there are medical doctors, a high percentage of them, that they treat patients who they perceive as thin and healthy much better than patients that they perceive as being out of control or overweight, and will project blame onto the patient for being overweight, and therefore, well, why bother treating this patient like a human
Yeah.
being, because they don't care about themselves. And this, whether it's conscious or not, it's so fascinating to me that it still impacts the doctor's ability to move forward with appropriate Cushing's diagnostic processes and all of that, because at the end of the day, like you said, it doesn't hurt them to initiate testing. It doesn't cost them anything. You're the one that's paying for it, or whoever is paying for it, whether it's insurance, whether however it's paid for, it's not coming out of the doctor's pocket.
Exactly.
So it was always interesting to me that some doctors act like, oh no, I'm not going to go ahead and test you, where it really it shouldn't bother them at all. So
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay, so let me ask you this. So did you finally find an expert
Yes.
in Cushing's? Okay.
Yeah,
And can
I
you
was lucky.
tell us a little bit more
I
about that?
found I'd found an endocrinologist, or so like here in Canada, and I live in the Yukon in Canada, and so I had choice of, of them picking an endocrinologist in Vancouver or Edmonton, and I chose Edmonton because I had lived there for a little bit, and had friends there, and so I was able to get referred to an endocrinologist that had actually done, like, has worked extensively with Cushing patients, was fully aware of those type of patients, and had done, like, research and study and papers and stuff. So again, I was really blessed and lucky to find somebody who was very smart, and she was the one that told me about cyclical Cushing's. So, like, I mean, I was appalled when I've been on, on some of these Facebook groups and stuff, to hear endocrinologists not even admit to cyclical Cushing's. I'm like, how do you not know that? Like, how do you, so many
Yeah.
people, and it is evidence based, and yet they just still refuse to believe it. And I'm like, you're in that field. I don't understand. So, but
Yeah.
anyway, again, I was really lucky. So I did find help that way.
I love that. I love that so much. And if anyone's in your area looking for an expert, because you're an advocate, and even outside of your advocacy with Epic, but you are reachable. So if anyone wants to be put in touch with Liz for information, just reach out to us, and we're more than happy to put you in touch with her. Before I forget, because I will forget, her email is elizabeth@epictogether.org. But for anyone wanting to reach out. So tell us a little bit about, if you can just capture for us what your life was like before Cushing's, before your life changed so drastically.
And it's funny because when I start to tell people my story, I know any other person living with Cushing's, or trying to find out if they have Cushing's, is almost the same story. It's, I was happy. I was in shape. I didn't have body image worries. I had self-esteem, confidence. Um, didn't, like, was good. I was going to college. I was doing the things that I had said I was going to do since young. Like, I've always been one of those people that I set my mind to it, and I want to go, and I'm going to do it. Um, so life was so different before Cushing's, for sure. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people find it very difficult to believe it when you say that life literally changes in a blink of an eye,
Yeah.
but it really does, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so, um, how have you dealt with, um, or how did you deal with Cushing symptoms, through this whole process? I mean, you just went through so much with it. How did you deal with it? And what kinds of help have you sought over the years?
So, and like maybe anybody else, like, when you deal with Cushing's, you deal with it day by day. Because you can't even think ahead beyond one day, sometimes beyond 1 hour. Like, you might be feeling like you wake up and you'd be like, actually, I feel really good. Today I'm going to get these chores done. And then within an hour, you can barely get off the couch.
Yeah.
Um, like I I didn't want to think future because it just felt so bleak at the moment. So that's why when I say day by day, you just take it day by day. I was really and still am really into the kind of like self-help stuff. Um, uh, I Wayne Dyer, Wayne Dyer is and it still is a big part of helping me um, come to terms with like that something kind of terrible happened to me in my life. Um, and that it's okay. Like it's not the best, and I would never wish it on my worst enemy. But
Yeah.
I've always been a firm believer, even before Cushing's, that everything happens for a reason.
Mhm.
And I know it's crazy to think that like that something as life altering and not a positive way like this can is meant to happen. But I think about in my life, you know, where I moved, what I did, who I met would never have happened if I hadn't had Cushing's. And it really has shaped me into a stronger person because of it. Being I definitely like the health advocacy part. I mean, I still do it even now. Um, Even with like smaller things, not as big as Cushing's, I'm still like, I don't like what you've said, so I'm gonna go to somebody else, or I think you need to rethink that.
Yeah.
And let's look
Yeah.
in this direction. So it's I pushed through it is what it was. Is I can be a really stubborn person, and I always said to myself is Cushing's is not going to win. I refuse to let it win. I've got things that I want to do, and it's not going to win over me at the end of the day. I can't do that.
Yeah.
That's not who I am. So yeah, I did lots of practicing gratefulness, which is really hard at the same time, right? When you feel pretty picked on by the universe, like why what did I ever do in life to deserve something like this? And some days, on my lowest days, the only way I could kind of even get out of bed was thinking, what are things that I have great to be grateful for? Even if I started off with one thing, um,
Mhm.
that helped. It did, you know.
Yeah. Well, how powerful. Um, I too have gotten a lot from Wayne Dyer. God rest his soul.
Yes.
Um, what a difficult thing to practice every day, though. The spirit of gratitude and finding meaning in your experience, as difficult and challenging as it has all been. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, another thing that kind of helped too was, of course, like I sought out all these pages that on Facebook and stuff, and just knowing that I wasn't I might be the only one literally in the whole Yukon territory that has this.
Mhm.
But just knowing out there in the world that it was depressing at the same time because I'm like, it's awful that other
Mhm.
people are experiencing the same thing, but it's also good to know
Yes.
I'm not the only one that knows exactly what this feels like.
Mhm.
So I seeked a lot of I joined a lot of those pages, and I mean I will admit sometimes reading through it would make me sad because I'd read a story of somebody who I was like that's me, that's
Mhm.
totally me, and I'm so sorry that they're going through that too, and they have no idea what's to come kind of thing. But it was also good too to like reach out to some people and say like, oh, I've experienced this, but I did these things and this is what helped. And so even if I could help one person, um,
Yes.
that was worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I gotta tell you, like your energy is so infectious, but just you're such a beautiful light. I mean, you really are. I mean, we've known each other for several years.
Long time.
Power of virtual connectivity here, and which has been such a blessing. And you know, uh, um, and we also have met one time in
Yep.
person, which is
In
also a
Vegas.
fun story. In Las Vegas,
That was
we
awesome.
went to a conference with another organization, and it took place in Las Vegas in 2013,
Wow, the
and
time.
that was in 2013. So
Oh my.
it's just amazing because we meet so many people through these support groups and everything, and so I get to say that I actually saw you in person,
Right. Met you in person.
which is so fun. Okay, so um we could talk forever. I know. I always say I'm gonna just talk for this long, and then it always. But this is just so great. I could talk to you forever. Um. Okay, so I'm gonna sort of jump around a little bit because I want to get to another surreal part of your story, which I can also relate to, which is Liz. You went from having Cushing's. Um, to having adrenal insufficiency.
Yes.
And for those of you who don't know, Cushing's has to do with having excess cortisol in the body, and adrenal insufficiency is on the other end of the spectrum where your body is not producing enough cortisol. Cortisol is life sustaining. So if we don't have the amounts of cortisol that we need in the body, that can also lead to a fatality. So, but what I want for you to tell us is, so you went through the diagnostic process, you received treatment, and I'd like to hear about that. Was it a result of the treatment that you received that led to adrenal insufficiency? If you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've had 3 brain surgeries. When I had the first one in 2009, it went well, and then about a month later, I just knew I was Cushing still. And I remember telling my specialist, like, I think it's still there. Um, and then so, and that whole process took another 2 years. So they did a second brain surgery. And that one was it was a little harder because about a month. So the day I went to go leave the hospital after my second brain surgery, I was leaking clear fluid out my nose.
Mm.
And so, I mean, I'd had the doctors tell me before, like they really try to scare you, and then, like, you can't lift over 5 pounds because then you might get a CSF leak. So I mean, that really scared me. But anyway, so after my second brain surgery, I was leaking this clear fluid out my nose, and the
Mm.
doctors did a CAT scan. They said, "You're fine, you're fine. It's just healing fluid, whatever." Right. So they sent me home, and this is me going from Edmonton all the way back to Dawson City. I leaked that clear fluid out my nose for the entire month that I was home before I had to go back for my checkup. Large
Oh my
amounts of it. Yeah. So I remember, this is kind of gross, so I apologize for some people, but I remember lying in bed and I couldn't lie on my back because I would choke on this fluid, which at the
oh
time I
my
really didn't know what it was, but I was suspecting what it was.
God.
So I did a little experiment. I went and grabbed a glass and I laid on my side and I kind of let it drain. And within like 15 minutes, I had it to about that much, and which is really alarming. Um, so this goes on for a month. I go to Whitehorse to go catch my flight the next day. That night, I got really sick.
Mhm.
I had a really bad headache. I was throwing up a lot. And weirdly enough, my husband called me in the morning, before I was gonna check out of the hotel and go to the airport. And I was like, I'm not feeling good. I said, I don't know what's wrong, but and he just knew that there was something really bad because I'm stubborn because I was like, I have to go catch my plane, even though my head hurts and I can't stop throwing up. He called my friend. She came to the room, and I was crying. I was done. And she said, I need to get you to the hospital. And they get me to the hospital, and I explained, I had a brain surgery a month ago, have this clear fluid, and I'm really sick. So they said, okay, we're going to do a spinal tap. They did a spinal tap and said, you have meningitis.
Mm.
Um, which, you know, with Cushing's and brain surgeries and everything I've been through, that was the scariest thing I ever heard. Um, because people have died from that. People have gone blind.
Yeah.
People have been debilitated from from that. And so when I say three brain surgeries, it's because they medevaced me to Edmonton for them to close the large hole that had formed. Um,
Oh,
and 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 just so other people are aware, and maybe more doctors and neurosurgeons are becoming more aware of this, but because we don't heal like normal people, when they do a brain surgery, that little bone that surrounds your pituitary gland, when they drill through that, what they do is they take a bit of fat from somewhere on your body. And I was like, well, there's
mhm,
lots of gas on my stomach, so go ahead. And they
mhm.
take some of that and they stuff the hole with this fat, and then they kind of cover it with
Okay.
what they call the durafoam. And
Mhm.
what had happened with me was that durafoam was getting reabsorbed back into my body faster than the hole healed. And so
Mm.
basically, there was a large hole directly to my brain.
Oh my word.
And so no wonder I got meningitis, because
Mm.
leaking CSF fluid out your nose for a month. So the third brain surgery was for them. And again, I was really lucky. I had really incredible ENTs. So anyone that has Cushing's, and if you go to have the surgery, you'll have an ears, nose, and throat surgeon as well, because they're the ones that get your neurosurgeon to the part of your brain that they need to get to. And they were incredible, and they just cut out a flap of skin from inside my nasal passage there and flapped it over the hole,
Mhm.
which then stopped the leak. But I
Oh.
had found out from other people that that was becoming more common, was that they were having to do that with patients so that they weren't having these holes
Yeah,
developing.
yeah.
Understanding that pushing patients, this is what happens. So I go through all of that, only only to have a couple months where I'm like, I still have Cushing's. I know I still have
Mm.
Cushing's. So the option for radiation was there, but my specialist had said, that takes between 3 to 7 years to make any difference, and time is of the essence for you. So the next option, and it's extreme, but it's also up to you, is to get an adrenalectomy. So I had a bilateral adrenalectomy, and they removed both my adrenal glands. Um, and one unfortunate thing is, I, s- I, s- I will give Cushing's that it is persistent.
Mhm.
So it's still there after
Mm.
all of the stuff I went through. So I ended up getting rapid arc radiation as
Mhm.
well, to try to target like you were saying, Karen. A tiny amount of cell, tumor cell, like, and it can be like you said, you can't even detect it on an image. It's just like a few cells can do huge amounts of damage to a body.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, I mean, even into the more rare category of Nelson syndrome, where I still have Cushing syndromes, or, Cushing's disease aspect of my body, I still produce high levels of ACTH, which even to this day, we are having trouble bringing that down. And then now I have Addison's from having my adrenal glands removed. So now, and I mean, that's a disease that I wish more people would know about too, is having Nelson's. But it too is all manageable. Addison's is really, really scary, but all manageable. Um, yeah, so from someone who was scared to like get a needle to get their blood taken out, I've
Yeah.
had a lot of stuff happen.
Tell me about it. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like if you didn't live it yourself, you wouldn't believe it, right?
Absolutely.
It's hard. And when we tell our story, and thank you so much for taking the time, because like I said, there's power in your voice, there's power in your story. And it's so powerful for the people listening, because so many of us feel so alone
Yeah.
in our experience, and you feel like this, no one's going to believe this. And then, you know, there's so much courage and bravery in telling the world your story.
Yeah.
But it's so surreal. It's so
Yeah.
surreal.
Yeah.
And one thing about the stories that a lot of us tell is that it's almost like it's never ending. It's like you go through one brain surgery. It's like, okay, this is it. And for some people, and we're all very eclectic. I mean, we all have varying stories, and some people do achieve remission right after the first brain surgery. Recurrence is there's a high prevalence of a recurrence in the Cushing's community. But man, you've been through so much. And even when you say a shout out to all of our warriors out there, even when you say, I went through all this, then they removed vital organs from my body, my adrenal glands that sit on top of the kidneys, to let everyone know. And they, the pituitary communicates to the adrenals for how much to produce, and it also produces aldosterone, other hormones, but aldosterone is also life sustaining, helps to balance your potassium and sodium. Boring stuff. We could go on about this forever. One thing about us is we have to become very well versed in all this medicalese because it helps to save us. But it used to be thought that was the end all and be all, right? You remove the adrenal glands, and then you have then you technically have Addison's, which is the lack of cortisol production, adequate cortisol production in the body. And then it used to be thought, well, you know what, Addison's is also life-threatening, but you can manage it. And shout out to all my adrenal insufficiency survivors out there. People in the adrenal insufficiency community will certainly tell us that it's nothing to sniff at, nothing at all. It is a life-altering and life-threatening disease as well. But we're told in the Cushing's community that, we'll be able to manage. And then you say, well, if you have tumor cells up here and you got residual tissue, hey, that's a formula for these Cushing symptoms to persist, or, other things to happen. And it used to be thought that even rest tissue was very rare, but there are people where their entire adrenal gland has grown back. So it's just, wow. It's almost like this monster just like coming back in the scary movie, right? Or like the killer that you think that you shot, and it's like all over, and it's like, and then you look up and it's like, oh no, he's behind you, It's kind of So you had the BLA, but then you dealt with the Nelsons, which you're also a very avid advocate for. Nelsons, which is having no adrenal glands, so lack of production there, with either a tumor or tumor cells still existing in the pituitary that produces an excess level of the ACTH. So that comes with symptoms as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the symptoms affiliated with Nelson syndrome, Liz?
Yeah, so it's basically, so if anyone had Cushing, so you still have a little bit of the Cushing symptoms. You'll still, sometimes struggle with the weight, and the fatigue. Having the Addisons on top of it, it's this fine balance, of you need to take a steroid to have your cortisol, but at the same time you have these bad memories of too much cortisol and what it does to you. I found after all the surgeries and stuff, and it could be from both Addison's or the Cushing's, really really terrible memory, really bad memory. I'm too young to have this kind of bad memory. And that bothers me a lot. I even have alarms for my alarms. I have to put alarms to take pills, which is one of the aspects. Once you get rid of your adrenal glands, you have to be your adrenal glands and take your steroid. If you take prednisone, that lasts longer in your body, so it's a little better. But I take hydrocortisone, so that's only going to last in your body for 5 hours. So, you have to dose so many times a day. And then it's in a whole new ball game when you're having to stress dose. Which, by the way, when I had my adrenalectomy, it was a little disappointing. The doctors didn't really tell me what symptoms to look for when you're going to
Mm.
have a crisis and what to do when you, because they just say, like, okay, so you know your adrenal insufficiency, and if you get stressed, uh dehydrated or sick, you could have an adrenal crisis. But it's like, what does that look like? And then if I do have any of these things, how much do I take? And then, not telling somebody that then you have to wean, like if you take so much, like if you triple your dose, that you have to wean yourself back down for so long. Like I've gotten good at it now because I've figured it out. But I mean, those are the kinds of things that those were the tools that they didn't give me that they should. And I understand each person has different symptoms when they're going to have a crisis. I am very blessed. I have not had a crisis. I'm sure I've probably been close, maybe once or twice. Um, but I've never had one, and so everyone will have different triggers. I found that if I was low on my steroid, I'd start to feel nauseous, and I
Mhm.
figured that out, that for me specifically, it was, oh, okay, I either need to take a little bit more of a pill, or, oh, I think I forgot to take one because I don't feel awesome.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I'm just in awe of the self advocacy because it's so vital. And I think sometimes people think we're joking or being exaggerate when we talk about the nature of how serious Addison's disease is, which is a form of adrenal insufficiency. But it truly is. I mean, you know, you literally still live with a life threatening illness. And adrenal insufficiency is life threatening because we need cortisol to survive, and many medical professionals do not prepare you for that. Our bodies produce up to 10 times the amount of cortisol to compensate for stress. So anything from like a car accident to maybe even perhaps a really bad argument or something, your body would naturally pump out more cortisol. And because you can't do that, naturally, you have to artificially take cortisol. Well, we're not robots, so how you gauge that? There's such a learning curve with that,
absolutely.
right? And as a result, some people do go into adrenal crisis. I myself have experienced that, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and we have lost. I mean, I think that we know of about 60 people in the last like 3 years to adrenal crisis
Yeah.
that we know of. So it's really scary when you think of it. That with all of that said, I guess I want to wrap I want to wrap up this interview with this. What what do you see in your future when you visualize what your future will look like? What do you envision? And with that, what gives you hope, Liz?
So it's funny, and I know I'm probably not alone in this. Sometimes, like, when you think about, what your future holds, and thinking about hope, some days you don't feel like there is a future, or there is hope, and it's really hard to have hope, especially if you're, whether you're trying to get diagnosed, or you're in the middle of it, or you're on your way to remission or whatever. And again, uh, when I stop and I think about that, I see in my future, what gives me hope, and in my future, is that I'm still here. Cushing's didn't win, and I didn't let it win. Addison's is not going to win either. And what gives me hope is that, the fact that I'm still here, after all those years of struggling with the weight, and what it did to my self-esteem, and making me feel invisible, which I never felt before Cushing's, is that I've now lost a bunch of weight. I used to look at other people's stories and see them lose weight after, Cushing's, or in remission. And I was like, when am I going to get there? You know, like I don't, it seems so hopeless. I'll never get like there. And I went from 238. I am now 138 pounds. Sorry. I went from 250
Oh,
to 38. So
you look amazing.
thank you.
Amazing.
So I think the biggest thing I can say for people is there is hope, and my hope is like is that I do have a future, and in that future I see me, you know, going back to the gym and not resenting it, whereas because I resented it because you know I went and worked out and it didn't do what it does for everybody else. So and
Right.
I see in my future doing that, getting back in shape, um, you know, doing activities that I never thought I'd be able to do, doing hikes. Did some really big, extremely hard hikes last year, which was amazing. And I didn't think
Wow.
somebody with Addison's, it worried me. You know, it's a huge stress on the body, but I did it
Yeah.
and I was okay. And I didn't have a
Wow.
and I didn't have to, you know, triple dose. And so I have my hope and my future is that I can have some semblance of a normal life, like what my new normal is, and that does give me hope. Um, yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, there are so many people out there without hope, and they have given up. One thing that really resonated with me about your interview today is how you talked about taking it moment by moment,
Yeah.
you know, just like living in every moment. And that's really so true because there's so many ups and downs. And like even within your story, I mean, we couldn't even touch like a percentage of your story. There's so much, but the fact that you have hope, and that's why I call you a thriver.
Thank you.
You know, I love that. Our mission statement is, that we give people the support, advocacy, and tools to empower chronically ill patients and their caregivers to thrive. And if you look at the definition of empowerment, it means to make someone stronger in claiming their rights. So I heard that all throughout your story, like claiming your right to adequate care, claiming your right to be treated like a human being, claiming your right to figure out what was wrong with you and to get better. And
Yeah.
to thrive means to flourish despite adversity or to move forward, no matter how long it takes, And I love that you're a thriver and that you empower other people to thrive.
Thank you.
So I want to personally thank you for that, Liz. It makes me emotional thinking about it because I really, just really moved by your personal journey.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
thank you so much. We have a couple of comments here that I do want to get to. Mary, thank you for joining us, Mary. She's she's a member of Epic and a regular audience member. She said, "Wow, Liz, your story brings tears to my eyes." She said, "I can't believe your strength and courage. God bless you, my warrior sister."
You.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Mary. And Rachel, has also joined us, and she made a couple comments that I'm reading off to the side here. She says that she said, "I have AI now after my surgery, and I'm struggling with it a lot. I get so tired with it. A lot of people don't understand." She said, "Thank you both for this interview. It's so very empowering to hear you both. It is an ongoing battle. So much love, fellow warriors, definitely adjusting to a new normal." It is quite an adjustment, isn't it?
It is. And you'll get there. You'll get and it's your normal, no one else's. That's the biggest thing I can say is no matter what other people have to say about it, they're not living with it. You are. So
Yeah.
it'll be your new normal and it will be a normal. I mean, yes, we you grieve a little bit because you'll never be the way you ever were. That's fine. I'm okay with the person I am now. I totally am okay with that.
Yeah. Such a great point. It's your new normal. It's not the past. It's what's happening now. It really is. And yeah, let yourself go through the, you'll go through the 5 stages of loss, you'll go through grieving,
Yeah.
you'll go through all of that. And certainly, like we said, we've covered, how many of us can say that we've lived with both Cushing's and adrenal insufficiency? You swing from one end of the pendulum to the other. And adrenal insufficiency is, it's definitely something that you manage to survive literally every day, but
Yeah.
you're doing it. So
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you joined us today. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you.
I
This was
really
great.
appreciate it. Any last words that you would like to leave our audience?
Just to thank you personally for having this opportunity for me to talk about it. It's great. It empowers me again. It reminds me, the positives, because it's so easy to get caught up in all the negatives of life, let alone, your own personal struggles, right? And Epic is amazing, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. And yeah, and thank you so much, Karen. You're an amazing, amazing woman, and I'm so glad that our paths crossed.
Oh, that means so much to me. Thank you so much. All right, guys. Take the time to watch this again. Share it. I can't stress this enough. We streamed on Facebook. We were also streaming on YouTube. Listen, if you're a YouTube audience member, like this video, share it, subscribe. That's the only way that we're going to get this message across. I can't stress that enough. If you keep it to yourself, then we can't increase awareness and we can't spread the message. It's so vital that you share this information with others so that we can increase awareness. And remember always, together we are epic. All right, guys. See you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.